Imagine waking up every day truly refreshed, energy flowing, mind clear, and ready to take on whatever life throws your way. How great would that be? Today, we're getting real about what's behind fatigue, brain fog, and those frustrating blood sugar crashes with none other than Renee Kindler, a board certified nurse practitioner, sleep expert, and functional medicine pro. We're diving into the connection between hormones, blood sugar, and what it really takes to feel fully alive again. I'm your host, Simone Annawalt, and you are listening to Naturally Speaking. Renee, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to hear from you. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. And I always love talking about sleep and hormones. So I'm excited for us to chat here.
I am really excited too. So, hormones and blood sugar, when I ask you to speak about this, it's such a huge topic right now. So many people are struggling. They just don't know who to turn to. And I myself, I wish I had to talk to you like 2 or 3 decades ago, because really, for me, it started in my 30s, and I'm 60 now. Um, so help us out. What are some of the early, lesser known signs that your blood sugar and your hormones might be out of sync, aside from just what you're eating?
Yeah, it is interesting. We do see actually a lot of these things sometimes happen for women, even starting in their teens, when hormonal changes are happening, and especially as we see an increase in polycystic ovarian syndrome that women have and changes with their cycles. So some of the things people see early on, later, is just that feeling of feeling wired, but tired. So you're not just exhausted, but you're awake at night, can't fall asleep even though you're exhausted. Waking up at 3 in the morning is often linked to an increase or decreased blood sugar levels. So you're having spikes and dips, and your body's waking you up to deal with that. Skin changes, acne can be related to a lot of things, but definitely you can see it with that. Women typically might get more persistent dry patches. And also this can be seen, maybe some of the audience might have experienced this during pregnancy, but you also see sudden skin tags that can happen. Insulin resistance or hormonal imbalances. And so some people have those during pregnancy, but then also experiencing those at different times, or changes in the color of your skin around your neck and under your arms can definitely be related to hormone and blood sugar changes. And then there's just your hair. Not just sometimes that people lose it, but sometimes the texture of it can be a clue. Sometimes we get things like bloating and we react different to different things. And maybe a lot of people can recall that at different times during our cycle, there can be mood changes just like that. Some people have different reactions to foods and bowel changes at different times during their cycles, and cravings. All those things are related to blood sugar and hormone regulation. And even sometimes when we feel like our thermostat is broken, like we're cold all the time, all the things when our blood sugar is spiking up and down, and that hangry feeling sometimes people can get. If you know somebody who, if they miss a meal, people are like, get them some food because they know that difference is coming. Those are all signs. Now, there can be a lot of different things that can have these symptoms occur, but there are things that should make you think about it. And while we're talking about that, I should say too, for everybody when we're talking, remember I'm a nurse practitioner, but I'm not your nurse practitioner. So before you would make any changes or use supplements or change medicines or anything, you always want to talk to your provider. But I believe knowledge is power. And sometimes having things where you can say, okay, could this be going on or could that be going on, really helps you to have to be empowered to try to see, is there something going on that I can address, or is there something I need help with?
So you touch on something that I have been struggling with, which is, thinning hair. Can you expand on that a little bit? What are some of the things that women can do to get their hair back?
It is something I see people with frequently, they come in because they're losing their hair. It's something that we are less, I think we tend to be less tolerant of than some of the other symptoms that we tend to tolerate more. But it's always a good thing listening to your body, seeing what's going on in your body. It's kind of like a vital sign of what's going on with things inside. The thing about hair loss that can be tricky is there are a wide range of things that can cause hair loss. Oftentimes can be hormonal, but stress is a big thing too. Too high of a testosterone, too low of a testosterone. Imbalances between estrogen and progesterone can cause that. Insulin changes because blood sugar and testosterone oftentimes go together. And I always tell people about hormones, what's interesting and what our body needs. Our hormones are Goldilocks, go by the Goldilocks principle, I always say. Not too little, not too much. So a lot of times too much or too little of the hormone can cause the same symptoms for people. And so that's why having somebody who can measure or look and walk through that process with you can make a difference. There is just general inflammation for some people, an autoimmune disease in that general inflammation can cause people to have hair loss too. So there are a lot of things. And then there are genetic predispositions to different things, just like some people who gray earlier, that can be too. But really making sure you're looking at all those things, because I think that's one of the things we think when we just become accepting of things that are just part of getting older, or this is just what happens in my family. A lot of times people might have genes, but there are things that turn them on. Sometimes we've been exposed to something that makes us more susceptible to something. Sometimes what we are eating or not eating, what nutrients we are eating or not eating, or what we are digesting and absorbing into our body nutrient-wise, because you also need good iron stores to make your thyroid work well, which is one of the things sometimes when you're having trouble with sleep or hair loss can be related to. So a lot of times looking at that whole picture, and a lot of times women who have struggled with hormonal imbalance and cycles tend to have had heavy cycles, and then they can be iron deficient, even if they're not anemic yet. And that can impact hair and hormone production because, like I said, you need iron in order for your thyroid to work right. Now, again, it's tricky because iron is over the counter. Iron can cause a lot of havoc in your system if you don't need it. There are types that are less bothersome. I just had a patient this week who was telling me that she had been on iron replacement for 12 years because she's had anemia because of her cycles. And we started working together, and she said, I was always told iron just bothers your stomach. This is what you just have to take. And we changed to a different form of iron. And she's like, I'm not bloated and I'm not constipated. She was taking all these things for constipation. And she's like, why have I been told that I just have to take this? And so that's one of the ways how I approach things differently. Because then too, why are you losing so much blood? Why don't you have enough iron? Like trying to figure those things out can be very helpful for people too along this hormonal journey. And all those things play into our blood sugar too.
And one of the things you mentioned about hair loss and many other issues is stress. And I want to really hit on that topic hard because it seems that everything, not everything, but a lot of things are consequences of stress, right? Chronic stress, chronic blood sugar issues, and that creates all kinds of problems. So, touch on some of the things that we can do to reduce stress and how we can, manage the cortisol that happens from stress.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because this is one point I always like everyone to stop what you're doing and listen and hear. Like if you learn nothing else from what I'm talking to you about today, I want people to hear because this is a pretty amazing thing. Our blood sugars are impacted by cortisol. That's our stress hormone, regardless of anything we eat. So just stress alone can increase your blood sugar. That's why a lot of times maybe when people are in the hospital, they have blood sugar issues because that is in increasing that. So chronic stress can do that too. And so you can do all kinds of things. And if your body is stressed and you're not sleeping, you likely will continue to have issues with your blood sugar. So the things like sleep, okay? 8 hours of sleep. And if you're struggling with that, figuring out what's going on with that. Sleep is when we produce most of our sex hormones. And so when we're not sleeping, that's a good way for us to be negatively impacting things. If our blood sugar is spiking up and down, that oftentimes is worse at night. Not drinking coffee on an empty stomach because it spikes your cortisol in the morning and messes with your blood sugar again, because our bodies try to help us maintain things as long as they can. So even just stopping to breathe can be helpful for people. I always remind people protein, fiber, fat. When we're trying to regulate our blood sugar and our stress levels, stopping, sitting down, eating, chewing food, and trying to make sure we have protein, fiber, and healthy fat so that we can help stabilize our blood sugar. That can be helpful too. Many people have probably heard this, moving, walking for 5 to 10 minutes after you eat when you can. Our quads are a big muscle group, and our muscles help us to be able to process glucose the way we should. And also when we walk, and especially if we're out in nature, that's a good way for us to, again, bring that stress level down. So that can be another avenue. And even something as simple that we forget, just like sleep is important, is, are we hydrating? Because when we don't have the electrolytes and the nutrients we need, then we might not be able to deal with our stress as well. And then we get this bad cycle, certain stress depletes certain nutrients. And when those nutrients aren't there, we're less able to handle our blood sugar and we're less able to handle our stress. And then it just creates this ongoing cycle of distress in our body. Even just, I tell people too, all the time, I dare you to sit and take 3 deep breaths in and out. And you can even do that while you're listening to us right here and not feel a little more relaxed. It just is a way our body works. And that can be really impactful, just those kinds of things for people.
That makes such a big difference. And I wish I knew then what I know now.
Right.
I am doing whenever I feel like I'm getting a little stressed, I just stop and take 3 really deep breaths, and that really changes things, I've always been from 20 years ago, just not a good sleeper. And it used to drive me crazy. People are just sleep. And I'm like, oh, don't you think I'm trying to sleep, And it used to drive me crazy. So sleep is when your blood sugar, like when you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, your blood sugar has dropped. Is that what, so if people are saying the same thing I was saying 20 years ago, people are saying, just sleep. What can I do to prepare to get a good night's sleep? And what are some of the things that might be happening in my body that are preventing me from having a full night's sleep?
So there are a lot of things that can cause that middle of the night awakening, but blood sugar can be something. One of the most important things I tell people when I talk to them about their sleep is what we do in the day impacts our night so heavily that it's something to really think about. Something that is free and that hopefully most people can do at least a few times a week. It can be tricky depending on where you live because you might not have the sun out as often or at the right latitude. But having a morning light, so you get light exposure to your eyes, preferably within 30 to 60 minutes of getting up, even for 5 to 10 minutes. And the difference between even standing out on your patio compared to sitting next to a window, everything helps. If you can watch the sunrise and the sunset, either of those can be helpful because we're telling our brain it's time to wake up and turn off melatonin, which is our sleep hormone in the morning, and turn on our cortisol to get us going. And at night, when we're watching the sunset, or we're turning the lights down in our house, or we're getting off of the electronics that are stimulating our brain and doing the opposite of what we want, that helps turn on our melatonin and turn off our cortisol because those things compete with each other. So when you do things, even like watching a crime show before bed or the news, things that cause you to be excited or frustrated, any of those things can cause you to have that cortisol rise. So again, you're competing with your melatonin. You also need nutrients. So making sure you're eating enough protein because you need nutrients to make melatonin. And so you have to have those on board. So making sure you're eating enough food, you're getting enough protein, you're getting enough complex carbs. It's very common for people who are trying to lose weight to really limit their carbs. And women frequently find that that will interfere with their sleep. And so watching that, and especially if you're somebody who's struggled with gestational diabetes, or if you barely passed your blood glucose test when you were pregnant, if you had a baby who weighed more than 9 pounds, these are clues that you could struggle later on with blood sugar, because pregnancy is a big stress test for our bodies. And so frequently when people see that, they are more at risk for issues later on. Or if there's diabetes in your family, those are things that you should pay more attention. And we have such great tools now. Sleep tools, Aura rings, ways you can watch your sleep on different watches, the continuous glucose monitors that you can get now. So if you're questioning, is this my overnight blood sugar that's causing me more trouble than sleep? Or is it my estrogen? Because here's the trick too. Estrogen, and again, we want that balance, but estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone all impact blood sugars differently for men and women. Too high of estrogen and too low of estrogen can make you less sensitive to glucose and insulin and how they work. So having that where it needs to be can be helpful too. And I'm trying to think. The continuous glucose monitors. I got on a tangent there. So those monitors can help you to know, and there even are some you can get over the counter now. I usually encourage people, if they're going to use them, to use them for 2 to 4 weeks. If you're not somebody who needs them for constant monitoring. The nice thing is that you and I may respond differently to different foods, to different stresses, to different things we're eating. How does taking a walk after I eat impact my blood sugar? How does it impact my blood sugar at night? How does having a snack if I need at different times? Those are great things, because you might eat a sweet potato and it might not bother your blood sugar hardly at all. And I might eat a sweet potato and now my blood sugar spiked way up. So really getting information and tools can be really supportive to see what's going on. And it may even help you. For some people, when they may try different doses of hormones, or it may be a trigger for them. Okay, I'm doing all these things. I'm having this issue. I have this change. Maybe I want to talk to somebody about whether or not adding hormones for me makes sense, or what that might look like.
And even if you don't have a glucose monitor, I would think that if you journal what you eat right before you go to sleep, and wow, I got a good night's sleep. What did I eat last night? You could start seeing some patterns on what nutrition is doing to your sleep. So I have a big question on magnesium. It seems like magnesium is the hot topic now, and there's a gazillion types of magnesium. So what do you recommend for in general, but also to help sleep?
So magnesium, I always tell people, if you have any kidney problems, you want to definitely have somebody guiding you with your magnesium use, just because it can cause issues. So you want to check in on that. In general, stress makes us use more magnesium. Magnesium helps us to, it helps our sensitivity to insulin and blood glucose. So that's a role it has. It is a relaxing, calming nutrient, mineral. And so frequently it depends on what all is going on with somebody for the type, but magnesium glycinate is frequently the type that I recommend if we're just going after sleep and or glucose and insulin sensitivity would be generally my first choice. And depending on that, can be a range of dose. So that really depends on the individual. But there are lots of, it's pretty easy if you Google there, you'll see all the different kinds of magnesium there. And some are better for other things, but any can be helpful. And there are a lot of foods, pumpkin seeds, a lot of the greens often are sunflower seeds that are higher in magnesium. And so a lot of times trying to put that in your diet can be helpful, but a lot of our soil doesn't have a lot of magnesium in it too. And like I said, if you're really stressed, you're burning through more. If you've been sick, it's kind of like with all our nutrients, right? So when somebody may have experienced a time when they've been sick and maybe they were barely hanging on with their nutrients, that's really going to push them down. Or maybe when you're somebody who, you got really sick and then you just kind of keep catching everything, a lot of times that is related to like where things have gone. So sometimes it's just something people need for a time. Sometimes people need it more long term, really can depend on. But replacing those things becomes more important. Our bodies are usually, not always, but usually more tolerant when we're younger. And so we also oftentimes stop absorbing things. So I always tell people to, a supplement doesn't replace everything in some foods, right? Because my apple has a lot more things in it than just the vitamin C that I can take for it, so that combination. But it's something to think about if you need extra support, because sometimes we're talking about, eating. So say if you're trying to get broccoli sprouts for something, a certain amount, you're looking at eating 40 pounds of broccoli to get what you can get in a supplement. So these are kind of some of the things that you consider when you're considering whether or not a supplement is a good option for you.
Mm. Well, thank you. One, I think part of this conversation, I would love to ask you also about weight gain with having to do with stress, cortisol, weight gain. Can you elaborate on that as well? And because even if you're not eating, right, if you get stressed, your cortisol is going to, I think, is it your liver that will dump more fat into your body or whatever it is. So can you explain that cycle and what we can do about?
Well, remember what I said is that stress can increase your cortisol irregardless of anything and stress, which produces cortisol, can increase your blood sugar irregardless of anything you eat. So supporting that stress response is always important. Breathing, sleeping, enough nutrition. Our body uses fat cells to store a lot of stuff when it doesn't know what to do with them. And once we get to a threshold where our body is insulin resistant, so it's not uptaking the glucose that we're feeding to it as well as it should. And that can be if we're taking too many calories or if we're not taking too many calories that are doing it that way. Once you hit that, without having supports like magnesium, hormone balance, sometimes at that point when you exercise, and I know there's a lot of people who feel a lot different about this, but if your cortisol level is also already so low, when you go exercise, you stress your body more. If you have sleep apnea, so all night your body thinks you're dying because it is not getting the oxygen it needs, it will keep your cortisol level up all night, right? Because it's going to try to push stuff out to get you to wake up and take a breath and not die, right? So anytime that your body is trying to do that, it's not worrying so much about balancing your other hormones and doing those things. You're in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, your body wants to keep things around to be there when you need it. And so that is why it really is not calorie in, calorie out. There really are things that impact people differently. And there really are times that certain medications may be a good support for you, or looking at exercising differently might be a good support for you. There are people that their fat is more inflammatory. Their fat is more responsive to cardiovascular exercise. Some people's fat is not very responsive to cardiovascular exercise, so they need to really double down on their nutrition and their strength training. So knowing those different things, unique things for your body, really can help you to be able to create a better balance for yourself, and also to give yourself a break. I think we should just give ourselves a break all the time too, but knowing that what the person next to you is doing might not work for you really is a true thing. And a lot of it depends on what your genetic bucket looks like, what kind of toxin exposure you've had, what kind of traumatic life experiences you've had, what type of illnesses or viruses you've had, and what nutrients. We have to have certain things there in order to help our bodies be able to even manufacture the hormones and the our little mitochondria to do what they need to get us the energy there. So all those things holistically looked at together can make a big difference in how our blood sugar is functioning.
Well, thank you. I have so many other questions. I know we're almost out of time, so we just have to have another podcast. But if you could leave our listeners with just one simple actionable step to start today, and so they can feel better, they can bring their blood sugar, their hormones into a balance, what would it be, and what kind of changes do you think realistically they can expect from doing these changes?
I would encourage them to maybe think about some of the things they've heard today and pick one or two things that they know can impact them the most. I always say protein, fiber, fat. One of the big things is not eating enough to support your metabolic needs and getting the nutrients on board for that. Sleep, some of the things we talked about that can help with morning light. A lot of people can do that. And if you can only do it one day a week, then you do it one day a week. If you can't do it more than that, that would be great, right? If you could do it every day. If it's during a time of the year when you can't, or your work hours are that you're not out when those things happen, there are happy lamps you can get that have the lumens for you that you can be exposed to that while you're eating, while you're putting your makeup on, whatever, to get that for you too. Would it work in your life to take a 5 to 10 minute walk after one or two meals of the day, however many days of the week that you can do that? Can you make sure you're drinking enough water? Because your body, part of the way it processes things, and like you mentioned earlier, wanting things to move through your liver, because one of the things that happens when we have blood sugar that is elevated a lot is can be related to something called our liver can get congested. People commonly hear of it as fatty liver. It's been renamed a little bit to be more representative of the metabolic changes. But the water helps us process things through too. So even that, if you aren't drinking your 64 ounces of water, and that's a starting point, okay? So that's a generic kind of number that way for people. If you're out in the heat, if you are trying to lose weight, different things can change that number for you. And consider just even putting a pinch of sea salt if you're somebody who can have salt, or electrolytes. Watching the sugar, a lot of the electrolytes you can add have a lot of sugar in them. So you have, or artificial sweeteners, which is a whole nother podcast subject that can be inflammatory. So looking at those things are ways to tell, and things that you think about. Those afternoon energy crashes, your brain isn't functioning quite the way you think it should. You're feeling like you're having to pull your focus back, and that wasn't something you had trouble with before. You're having more cravings. You're experiencing that hangry I talked about. Those are the kinds of things that should make you think, is something going on with my blood sugar, and how can and when those things improve, those are signs, if you don't have a continuous glucose monitor, that you are having some impact. So those are kind of some starting, and I tell people just pick one or two of those things that you think can fit in your life. If you've already done all those things and you're still struggling, I think it's time to talk to somebody, a healthcare provider, about looking a little deeper. But a lot of times just starting out to see, like, what can I do to help me feel or to address some of the low-hanging fruit, we call them, those kinds of things that we get busy and don't think about, that can be very impactful. I am always amazed, and I shouldn't be, but I'm always amazed at how just adding something to your diet, taking something away, and getting a good night's sleep impacts so much of people's lives when they first start working with me. It just is it's amazing to me that those few things can really help you round the corner, turn the corner to start believing that there is health and energy and clearer thinking on the other side, and that we can just keep making these steps as we go instead of trying to completely overhaul your life, becoming overwhelmed, and not having something sustainable. And then where are you at? So.
Right. And it's about progress, not perfection, right? If we
Yes.
try too much, it's I think it's harder to be more consistent. And if you're consistent, even as you mentioned, you do one thing, but you're consistent, you can see great changes. So anyway, well, thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
loved having you here, and I really hope we can do this again. I think this was incredibly educational, informative, and I hope to talk to you soon at
Great.
another
Thank you.
podcast. Thank you so much.